If you don't know, I work in the freight industry, and if there's anything that I've always dreaded, it has been sales. Now, since COVID began, which was back in March of 2020, right? A lot of jobs were essentially on hold. A lot of industries were on hold, and frankly, a lot of recruiting was just either on hold or canceled. During this time when I was looking for a job, now keep in mind, this was over 3 years ago. Um, Keep in mind that during that time, the only jobs available were pretty much sales positions, not even hospitality or anything else. Because of COVID, all new restrictions, working in the office, completely out of the equation. So I took it upon myself, to look for a job. Fast forward, I find a job in the freight industry, big trucking, freight, and logistics. If you don't know what that is, which by the way, it's a fabulous industry, basically truck drivers keep the country moving. They're delivering dry goods, produce, flatbed loads, everything essentially. Big freight and logistics basically run this country, and a huge part of this nation's economy runs on big trucking and freight. Now, if you don't have these, what we call owner operators or carriers, people who own these giant big rig trucks, usually, big van or reefer refrigerated trucks, then essentially product does not get moved. So if everyone were to go on strike, then product would not get moved. Shippers would basically panic, customers would panic, and consumers would panic because they don't have their product. Even if consumer spending was still considered low or high, whichever way, panic would still rise in the equation. But when it comes to big trucking, when I first joined my company, for example, and I work for a fabulous company, nothing negative about it. I work with a fabulous team. The business model is great, well compensated. I realized, this is a very like lucrative industry that a lot of people could really take more advantage of. But unfortunately, it's not for everybody. Now, obviously, when I first started, this was very stressful to me. But I took this as good stress. Why? Mainly because I'm not a guy who worked extremely hard in college. I'll be extremely honest about that. I breezed kind of through college doing the bare minimum. I had pretty much average grades, and when I really tried, I would obtain better grades in the B and A margin. But more importantly, post college, it's all up to you, right? So, what you choose to do whenever it comes to work, it's seen by your coworkers and your upper management, your boss, or whoever runs the show. In classes, like in college, you can get to work, you can go to class an hour early and begin studying, and people might notice that, but they'll think it's weird. Why? Because it's not the societal norm. The societal norm is, hey, you get to class maybe 5 minutes early, type of thing, and you just get out your notebook and you wait for the professor. And when I used to look at students like, that I had class with, they'd be inside that classroom like half an hour before class started. I thought they were weird. I'm like, what is this guy doing before class? But the reason being is because they had like an impenetrable mindset that they wanted to be successful in that class and get a really good grade. And while they were studying and whatnot, that created less time that they would have to study later on. So they could just get a good grade on the test and go on to the next subject or do whatever they wanted to do. And now, most of those people I know work in very good industries, working very good jobs and whatever roles. And of course, I had the absolute pleasure of networking with a lot of these people that I knew in college because they had this impenetrable mindset. But the only way you can really network with these sort of people is that you have to have a similar mindset. Now, I wouldn't consider myself very personable. Just I don't really like to talk to people. But when I joined big trucking and freight, logistics and whatnot, this was a extremely big learning curve for me. Why? Well, because I never had experience in the trucking industry. I worked prior in mortgage for however many months, and it just was not for me. And I'll be honest, my contract was cut because as soon as the volume of mortgage starts to decrease, I think this was during the summer months, they cut loose a lot of people on contract. Now, a lot of these people on contracts, they're not really given any benefits whatsoever. They're given low pay, very low promises. And as soon as they finish, their whatever you would call a probation period, I think it's like 500 hours, they have the opportunity to say, hey, we want to hire you full time or we don't really need you. So that's where, a lot of industries like mortgage has a high amount of turnover because they choose to cut contracts multiple people who are just fresh out of college who have a lot of optimism and high hopes. And then they realize the mortgage industry just isn't that stable. Now, when rates are extremely good, yeah, mortgage is great. You can make a lot of money. But when it's not, it's a very tough industry to be consistent with, as we've seen right now with mortgage rates and consumer spending dropping to a very you know lower than what it should be right now. Credit card rates are extremely high, so a lot of people are not spending as much. A lot of people are not buying as many homes as they were during COVID. And also because a lot of prices on homes have appreciated since the beginning of 2019, 2020-ish. But more importantly, when I joined this company, my mentality towards sales, now I wasn't directly in sales right away, but I would say that my mentality towards sales has always been a stigma. I always thought of sales as like you go to a car dealership and you look at these guys who are trying to sell you a car, and it's like they're just trying to make that sale, they get their commission. Luckily, the organization I work for, it's not commission based. So that allows the whole entire team that I work with to work more as a collective, and I totally agree with that because if it's like a high commission environment, you get a lot less sense of teamwork, collective nature, and you're working against each other because now it's all about me, me, me. It's not about a team aspect, team nature, right? So I really found myself in a lucrative industry and something that I definitely will be a part of long term. But as my journey into more of like the sales aspect of, this industry really started to take fruition, I realized I wasn't really as personable as I thought I would be. In college, you can talk to anybody, whatnot, but I always had a hard time selling. If I didn't get my way, I would instantly just walk away. Now, part of sales is learning to take no as an answer. And if you're making, I don't know, 100 to 300 phone calls a day, it's extremely important that you take away something from making that many phone calls. And obviously, you might get 95% rejections and that 5% will stick, but that 5% is all you need. You get quality people to run these truckloads for you. Now, without giving any specifics about, customers or whatnot, let's just say hypothetically you have a very large retailer, right? This very large retailer says, hey, I need you to ship this product from point A to point B. Here's your load. They send it over to you. You have a team who manages like the information in the file, like hey, need you put in these hours, are they first come first serve, are they by appointment, what's the weight of the load value, all this sort of thing, without giving any specifics, of course. And I realized when I started like attempting the sales aspect of this, I was absolutely terrible. And was I discouraged in the very beginning? Slightly, but I've come to realize very quickly that discouragement it's a no-go, especially in this industry. Like you're gonna take more no's than yeses. And then I realized, what? There's really nothing to be, discouraged about or negative about or frustrated because all these people are calling in and saying, hey, I want to buy this truckload going from point A to point B. It's just your regular guy just saying, regular guy or girl saying, hey, can I buy this? And you're just negotiating with them. And then I realized like, wow, part of what it was actually me not being as personable as I thought it would be. If you talk like a robot and you speak to other people in that sense, like you're reading off a script. Now, there's no scripts involved, but if you're reading off like there's a script, then obviously you're going to make it a lot harder to get whatever you need sold. I believe scripts are a lot more helpful in certain industries because the phone calls they make in other industries and whatnot for other companies are pretty much like exactly the same of what they're trying to sell. Whereas people in this industry could be calling for something completely different. It could be a dry van load selling dry products, or it could be a produce load, or it could be someone who says, oh, have you seen the cost of fuel? It's, going up or down. So everything changes. You never know what they're going to be asking for. And obviously there's a whole vetting process. But I think it's most important that by taking rejection, which I have never been very good at, I hate rejection. I've come to understand that rejection is a part of the industry and it's going to happen everywhere. Now, in terms of me being terrible at sales in the very beginning, I've completely seen myself grow. I wouldn't say exponentially, but substantially. Month over month, I continued to grow and continued to sell more. And part of this has contributed to not just practicing at work, but practicing all the time. And a lot of people I know will, let's just say in general, most people go home after work and they just maybe watch a movie, they might read a book, might have dinner, and then they go to sleep. My days have always consisted of, especially post college, trying to be better, of trying to learn and implement what I'm learning to execute for further knowledge and continue that process, day in, day out. And what I realized after a complete year of, hard reading, whether it's psychology, sales, business tactics, strategy, leadership, psychology, econ, whatever you want to call it, I realized most of it does not matter unless you implement it. Now, I take notes on everything I read, and it's hard to implement everything you read because just in the beginning of trying to understand everything that you're reading is hard enough. Trying to implement it, sometimes it doesn't work in the industry that you work in. So if I'm reading a book about finance, I can't really apply that to my industry because I'm more of like a lucrative, like, sales role, or, I'm calling people to get updates, for example. And it's all part of practice. So I said, okay, if I can't implement that, how can I implement maybe trying to sell things if it's not for monetary value in a different way? So I started practicing. And the only way you practice is by doing it continuously because you use it or you lose it, right? So I started practicing like whenever I go to the gym. I started practicing. And one of the biggest things at the gym where it's full of ego is trying to work out, in with someone else when they're on the same machine. Now, a lot of times, no one really bothers me when I'm on a machine, but when I really need to get on a specific machine, you could come off really honest, like, hey, like, how many sets do you have left? A lot of times, you put people right on the defensive. Now, sometimes, depending on who it is, people fold and they just go, like, oh, like, I'm done, or I have one more set, like, then you can have it. They don't want confrontation. Sometimes people go, like, oh, I just started, blah, blah, and they won't budge, and they'll make you wait there. So you could either take that as your answer and say, I can come back, but there might be someone else on the machine, and then you might have to like renegotiate. Or you could just say, hey, with all due respect, I see you're in the middle of your workout. I understand that. You look like you're just in tune with it. Would you be opposed to me working in with you? I'll be quick. I won't waste any of your time. And, I'm just going to be in and out. Couple of sets. And a lot of times, the fact that you're putting that much effort into trying to sell it to them, a lot of times, most people are willing to work with you. Now, this usually works with like one other person on the machine, but if it's two people who are like maybe working together, a third person is just, it's an oddball and it's like a third wheel. It's just awkward. So I don't usually try that. And it's been very tough to sell in the past, especially if it's like a guy and a girl working out together or two guys. Like to be that third person working out, it's just very awkward, because when we look at even numbers, it looks very parallel, very equal. But when we look at odd numbers, it just looks very out of bounds. Very, it's like that outlier that doesn't really make sense. So I started practicing this at the gym, and I found that it really started to help me just open up to people and to be more personable. And even if I didn't want the machine, I would just try it anyways. And you try it on everybody. You try it on girls, guys, introverts, extroverts. Like sometimes the biggest guys in the gym are the nicest guys. And I try this on guys who are like legit huge bodybuilders. Like, excuse me, sir, and the way you address certain people right away either puts them on the defensive or it opens them up to conversation. I go to a guy who middle aged, maybe older. This guy is probably cultured, I would hope so, and he's probably a lot more respectful. So I would say, hey, sir, sorry to bother you. Would you mind if I work in with you? I'll be quick. I won't waste any of your time. And, I just really need to fit this in. And more than likely, which has happened a lot of times, this guy would be like, yeah, you're more than welcome to work in with me because he shows that your presentation was, first of all, respectful. You sold it well, and you did a lot of other things included, with that whole entire opening that allowed you to sell it, like eye contact. You didn't stutter. You didn't have your head down looking at the ground. You weren't trying to act cocky or egotistical. You're just saying, hey, I'm trying to sell this. I'm trying to work in with you. And you realize we're all here for a common goal. Now, funny enough, a lot of people would laugh and say, like, oh, you're trying to sell things at the gym, trying to work in with people. But it's great to practice anywhere you go. Like just in general, just trying to sell things. And I'm not saying like I haggle whenever I go to the store, but it's always good to ask questions and it's always good to, speak up and to basically just understand where other people are coming from because sales truly runs this world. No one really makes money until they sell something, until you close a deal. Leads, potentials. I don't like those buzzwords or those words in general because they don't mean anything to me unless a deal has been closed or sold and it's locked in. And I like to make people feel special whenever let's just say, sell truckloads. I'm like, hey, I'm locking you in for this price and this amount. And it's very healthy to keep that rapport and that charisma and that, personable relationship between you and the driver, or you and the carrier who owns that truck, because you're doing business and there has to be a mutual level of respect. So I mentioned that, in the beginning, I was reading about all of this, sales and whatnot. Reading about it is the first step. Then you have to implement it. You can't be that introvert your whole life, just reading books, reading books, reading books, and you have all this information, but you've never actually used it. You've actually never put it out there on the web, or, posted a YouTube video or a podcast, which I always had a hard time speaking because I just didn't like speaking to people, or I didn't like putting my face on camera like I'm doing right now and speaking, because I'll be honest, I felt a little bit awkward. And it gets to a certain point where, do you want to be the creator or the consumer? And I don't want to be the consumer. So here I am. But most importantly, when it comes to sales, sales is everything. It doesn't have to be monetary. You could sell anything. Like if you're convincing a girlfriend, to go out to a certain restaurant, it's not too hard to sell. You could say, hey, you know what? This restaurant might be extremely busy. Is it worth waiting? Oh, you know what? You're absolutely right. Then that restaurant might be pretty expensive. So you say, so it's expensive and we have to wait. Let's go to someplace else that's more affordable, and someplace else that's going to allow us to be seated down fairly quick, might have better customer service, this and that. And of course, you can always ask for like little accommodations. And if this is a restaurant, they want to serve the customer, you, so they're more than likely going to be working with you. And it's always good to build a rapport, get business cards, you network with people. One of the things that I really want to mention apart from, sales is how people network. I've been to quite a few parties, good friends of mine, whatnot, maybe birthday parties or like, celebrations. And what I find really funny is that at a lot of these parties, a lot of people that I meet, I ask, I'm like, hey, how do you know so-and-so who might be like, the owner of the house or who's hosting the party? And most of them say, oh, it's from a third party or it's from a friend of mine. So I realize a lot of times you can be acquainted or you can meet someone new who knew someone else. And a lot of my really, really good friends nowadays, I met through a third party or I met through another friend of mine. I didn't just meet them, on social media or whatnot, and then just say, hey, like, let's grab coffee. I met them maybe at a get together, or someplace where we were like, people were networking or a party or whatnot. And I just went there just to hang out. And all of a sudden, it's like, hey, like, what do you do for work? I meet people in my similar industry or people in other industries. I like to pick their brains. And I realized that if you're very personable and you're willing to listen, part of sales is listening to the other side and not interrupting and interjecting every 5 seconds. Listening, opening up your ears, closing your mouth, keeping your eyes open. You can learn a thing or two. And, sales can be one of those positions where it's like, hey, it could be a very much of a burnout job, or it could be something that you can build upon and feed off of. Now, I wouldn't say that sales is something that like completely burns me out, because I think the idea of burning someone out is like you're fed up with what you're doing, but you're most importantly fed up with the people you probably work with or the people that you're dealing with. So it's not so much them, it's so much your mentality. There's a lot of great jobs out there, and there's a lot of jobs that people actually just do not like, but they have to work at because it gives them a paycheck. So it's very important to work on your skills, sharpen those skills to the point where you have people reaching out to you saying, hey, I want to offer you a job position. I'll give you a very perfect example. There seems to be an influx of job recruiters on social media. I had a job recruiter reach out to me on Twitter. It was very random. She found me on LinkedIn. She figured it would be more personal if she reached out to me on LinkedIn. I could really care less about the professional nature. Like if you reach out to me through text, so be it. As long as you're reaching out to somebody, me personally, I don't really care. Other people take offense to that. They think social media is very unprofessional to reach out to someone. Email is starting to become a thing of the past. But most important, like if you're getting a job and you're finalizing that job position through email, that's fine. But most importantly, people think you have to go on LinkedIn nowadays. You have to make a phone call. I get that. But there seems to be an influx of job recruiters nowadays. So where I'm getting at with this is that, a lot of these people don't know how to essentially sell. And when I was talking to a friend of mine, she's a recruiter for a recruiting agency / company, whatever you want to call it. I asked her, when you're recruiting for a job, how many people do you reach out to? Like, what's your process? And she says, well, first, I look at the industry it's in, how lucrative it is. If it's like software engineering, there's a lot of people out there who want that job, right? And there's a lot of people who are qualified. She goes, I'll filter them out. You let the computer and the technology do the work for you. As in the past, you would get maybe, I don't know, 200-300 resumes, and you basically browse through all of them. Now you have a computer or technology or software that filters people out. So you could say, okay, for this engineering position, I want people who have 3 or 4 years in the industry. I want people who have a bachelor's and a master's degree, and all of a sudden that'll cut applicants down from 300 to like maybe 30 or 40. And then from there, you screen, the rest of the people. Go, oh, this guy's been in the industry for a while, or this guy just got into it recently. We might not want to consider him because you don't know about the turnover. And if you're recruiting this person, you're also putting your reputation on the line by hiring this person who could be very much fired, or they just might not find interest in it. So you have to sell it. And then from there, my friend would message a bunch of people and say, hey, I've seen your background, this and that. Would you be interested in a career change? And basically, out of maybe 50 to 100 messages, you got maybe 5 people who respond back to you like, oh, I'm interested, what are you looking for, this and that. And from there, they negotiate, blah, blah, blah. And then the pay is usually like a big thing. Like, we can give you 10,000 more than what you're making now, or we can give you a signing bonus of X amount, this and that. But most importantly, the reason why people change jobs, sometimes it could be bad management, a bad manager. It could be yourself. You're not happy with where you're at, and some other company recognizes your talent, your potential, and your job history, and they go, hey, we want to offer you a slightly better position. Maybe if you're working sales, we can offer you a director of sales or a manager of sales role. And sometimes, even if it's not much of a pay raise, it's a title that really allows people to go, wow, that can boost my my image. And it might be a little egotistical, which is fine. It's good to have a healthy ego, but more importantly, what value are you providing to the company? And am I just sitting there? Am I just living the title, but I'm not doing much? Then you're probably in the wrong industry, and you're probably in the wrong mindset. So that's where my friend comes from when she's recruiting. Now, I had a recruiter reach out to me recently. Obviously, this recruiter will remain anonymous, but this recruiter reached out and said, hey, are you interested in a career change? Now, keep in mind, with the influx of recruiters, she's like one of 2 recruiters who reach out to me like maybe on a weekly basis, sometimes from the same company, and sometimes they copy and paste the same message, but their name is different. And it's honestly slightly embarrassing because you're reaching out from the same company. One of your other colleagues reached out to me personally maybe a month or 2 ago prior, and you're sending me the same message. Like, there has to be a list of people you reached out to so you're not messaging the same people. And of course, these recruiters have only been in the industry for X amount of months, not even years, at this company or whatever. So it shows that they're still new. They don't know the process. They don't know, the professionalism of, did we reach out to this person already? But sometimes you might reach out to someone again, and you might give them a second thought. One message might change everything. So this recruiter reaches out to me. And this recruiter says, hey, are you looking for a career change? We offer, the buzzwords, competitive pay, benefits, whatnot. And I'm sitting there like, okay. And obviously, 99.9% of these recruiters offer nothing of value to me because I already work a fabulous job, very well compensated, fabulous benefits compared to like 99% of other companies. So I'm already like not interested. But I play along once in a while when I'm bored, and I go, yeah, what does the pay look like? And this is where the recruiter got no more answers from me. This recruiter goes, oh, how much were your salary expectations? So essentially, this recruiter just answered my question with another question. And to me, I don't do that when I try to sell truckloads, like in my job. When someone says, how much are you paying? I don't ask them, how much are you looking for? I say, I'm paying X amount. And then I follow up with a question, is that something you could work with us on? And obviously, I'm not going to give specifics, but that recruiter is not going to get another message from me because they have simply lost interest. I have lost interest in that recruiter's message because simply they don't know the etiquette of when you follow up a question with a question, that's probably the worst thing you could do. You answer directly, you cut straight to the point, you skip the formalities. You've done this 100 times probably in the last week to other potential applicants. And it's just all about professionalism. But you have to create, some type of personability, a little bit of charisma. You gotta mix everything, in that melting pot. in order to stand out, And people feel special when recruiters reach out to them. But in reality, they're just trying to get whoever they can get because they're getting a cut from the applicant that they hire and then they hire, and that person that they hire, they're getting a cut for their paycheck, or they're getting, an extra check for, that referral, not referral, but that potential that they're hiring, if that makes sense. So that's like the reality of, sales. It runs simply everything in this world. And if there's anything that this job has helped me, hone in on and sharpen, it's sales, it's personability, it's rapport, and having taken more no's than yeses, it simply has made me a better person. Now, I'll be honest, my ego used to be tickled when I used to go to the gym, as I mentioned earlier, and I'd ask someone, can I work in with you? They'd go like, no. They would just simply say that, and I would get irritated because I wasn't used to hearing no. I said, well, you don't get used to it. So I said, okay, cool, no worries, type of thing. But when you learn how to present in a different way, sometimes you can sell it better. And sometimes, a lot of times, the way you look, like the way you present yourself, if you're dressed all muggy and you're not looking very presentable, a lot of people just don't want to deal with you. But when you're dressed presentable, you have a good haircut, if you're growing a beard, if it's well maintained, your skin is clean, everything's good. I'm not saying it has to be 110% all the time, but if you look presentable, a lot of times people know this guy takes care of himself. You know what? I want to work with this guy, or I'm willing to work with this guy. So those are very important things that have taught me how to become simply better and to simply lock in on how to be better at work and outside of work. And it's given me such a joy to be able to network with a lot of these people who work in the similar industry that I work in, because I've never really been one to network. I've been one to just sort of go to class, go back to my dorm, and just kind of be quiet. Even though I was a part of numerous organizations in college, like fraternity, business club, whatnot. I didn't do an extreme amount to stay networked. So that's one of the things that I regret. I wish I was doing more. And even though you might regret it from back then, that's a good thing because you're recognizing your faults. So hopefully moving forward, you can take those faults, learn from them, and the next place you go to, you can correct them or you can do better to, make yourself stand out more. So other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast of my little journey into sales, because this is something that probably a lot of people struggle with, even getting in front of a camera. If you asked me a year ago to get in front of a camera, I would have told you no. I simply do not care. And that is simply a very poor mindset. But now I just feel very comfortable doing this type of stuff because I enjoy teaching people, I enjoy mentoring, and a lot of opportunities that have come my way have simply benefited on both ends. It's very mutual. And I've learned a lot about myself and a lot about the industry. So hopefully we can keep this going, and hopefully we can just keep teaching people and spreading the knowledge, because nowadays, if there's anything that I feel like should be spread, it's not, negativity, it's knowledge. Because if we can't teach, the next generation or even our current generation, how do we expect to stay around for so long? So other than that, hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. Stay tuned for the next one. As always, I will talk to you guys next time. Take care.